Hello everyone, my name is Abigail Burns. I prefer to go by Abby. I think I've mentioned that in some of the previous discussions before. So I am actually, for this presentation, I am doing the second option. So I am doing a case presentation of an application of empirically supported treatment. And the treatment that I chose, that I do have experience and I've received supervision, is cognitive processing therapy. So before I get in, the plan is I'm gonna share my case study, kind of explain different things, go over my outline. I do have just a couple handouts, um, kind of just refreshing a little bit on some information with trauma, and then of course the actual case, the diagnoses. Yes, there is a PTSD diagnosis. However, there are some other ones in there as well, with some kind of other presenting information in there that I have. And then we'll talk about just reminders of CPT, and then, of course, the Christian worldview perspective. So I currently function as a supervisor for our community mental health. We are contracted through the community health in my county, and I supervise the therapists that are a part of that contract. It's a really cool opportunity. However, it is a public aspect of things, so I am not supposed to bring in my religious beliefs unless the client agrees to, which all my clients know when they come in my office that we will, incorporate their needs to the best of my ability. And if I don't know, I will ask, and I will also do research on my own as well. But this client is someone I've been working with for a bit, and it is an awesome experience to be able to share and kind of go through what has been done. And I'm hoping that you enjoy learning about the application. Um, the reason I chose this form is because I remember in my master's program, we kind of had to pick a theoretical approach, and I have always chosen cognitive behavioral therapy. It's kind of how my brain functions and being able to explain things. And CBT, as we learned, it does have more of a structure than CBT. So this actually goes through the different 12 sessions, and I will show you how I applied the information with this client. So what I'm going to do is I am going to share my PowerPoint with you all, and I just have to bring it up here. Here it is. I'm just gonna go back to the beginning part. What's gonna happen is in the bottom you can see my different references and things like that. So if we go, there's my name again. I'm doing the case study route just like I just said. That outline, once again, what's the diagnostic criteria for PTSD? Some of us might have covered this, some of us might not have. It just depends on our background. If our master's degree was in social work, or if it was in counseling, we should know. But just to highlight it again, so as you're thinking when I get to the case study, okay, this client definitely meets the criteria. Also, I get very fascinated with the prevalence of certain disorders. So I did put like a little bit of information about that in there. And then the presenting problem that the client came in with, and then what are some of the diagnoses that are in there. And then a little bit of the use of CPT, and also kind of just like goals and things like that. But in the use, it also goes through each of the 12 sessions. Then Christian worldview, and then of course a last wrap of all my references together. So we know that if someone meets diagnostic criteria for PTSD, they had to have gone through something traumatic. This is going to be, you're going to have the fear, helplessness, horror. A traumatic event can range from so many different things. It can be death, it can be sexual abuse, it can be veterans having that combat experience. There's so many different events that fall into this category. Also, as a result of the trauma, clients are going to be having reoccurrent intrusive thoughts, images, which that is one to pay attention to for our client that I'm going to be talking about. And then also reoccurrent distressing dreams, acting, feeling as if the event were reoccurring, psychological, physiological distress upon exposure to reminders. So this could be like an anniversary of someone's passing. This could be, maybe that client is isolated a lot more. The client is having a lot more panic attacks. Acting and feeling, this could be they feel like they're right there experiencing that attack again, and that is really hard on the body, mentally and physically. Of course, there's going to be an avoidance of stimuli associated with the event. You can kind of feel numb after experiencing something traumatic. You can try efforts to avoid thoughts, feelings, or conversations about the event. This could be someone that, had a miscarriage, for example, which that plays later into our case study, and she goes to a wedding 2 months later, and family is just asking how she's doing, what's been going on, all these questions, and that's the last thing you want to talk about at a wedding, right? Efforts to avoid activities, places, or people that remind the person of the event. This could be, was there a shooting that happened down the road and now that client is unable to drive over at that intersection and has to take a completely different route home? Is it something happened at work and now that client is unable to return to work without having some form of medication or needing immediate therapy? Inability to remember an important aspect of the trauma. So this often happens in clients of severe abuse, especially sexual trauma. There's a couple other disorders too, where that can assist with PTSD as well. In addition, there's significantly diminished interest and participation in activities. So this could be someone that loves to work out Monday through Friday, or just likes to do things, is involved in church, will go every Sunday, or be involved in choir or handbells or the youth, and they just stop doing that because of what happened. Feeling detached, estranged from others. While we all might go through different types of trauma, it impacts us all differently. Even if someone else is right there with us, that is still a different interpretation of the trauma that occurred. There could also be kind of restricted affect. Also, kind of the scary part is speaking about not having a future. So kind of watching out for that high risk of having that suicidal ideation. Also, there's increased arousal, not present before the traumatic event. And it will kind of be present in at least two of the following ways. So sleep is a big one. This could be trouble falling asleep, staying asleep. It's important to watch out for symptoms of psychosis. Also, the traumatic event can have an impact on our mood. Is this client more irritable than usual? Are there outbursts of actual anger? What about problems focusing? That is a big one too that can happen as a result of trauma. Hypervigilance or an exaggerated startle response. Does a person get super scared when you walk up behind them and put your arm on them? Things that we have to be mindful of, essentially. So, and An example is for my clients that have trauma. Let's say I forgot my pen. Sometimes I do that. I forget to grab my pen if we're doing like a screening questionnaire. I always tell them, hey, I just have to walk within a few feet of you. I'm just letting you know that. I'm going to grab my pen. Or they might sit in a spot where I have to actually walk behind them. And I'm like, hey, you're going to hear my feet. I'm just grabbing this paper and pen or my clipboard off my desk. I'm just letting you know that. Please let me know if you are uncomfortable. Always making sure that the client feels safe. In addition, the symptoms last at least one month, and the symptoms need to cause significant impairment. So prevalence, like I said earlier, one of my favorite things when I am looking at a diagnosis, 6% of the US population will have PTSD. That is a shocking number. During this year, which just was from last year, so in 2022, around 12 million adults in the US have PTSD during a given year. 8% of women develop PTSD at some point in their lives, and 4% of males develop PTSD at some point in their lives. That is a lot of trauma that is occurring in the United States, especially. Also, I don't have like the world national statistics for this. I specifically just stuck to the US just because this isn't a set PowerPoint on PTSD. So 70% of adults experience at least one traumatic event in their lifetime. This is where something like my agency uses the ACE questionnaire, so adverse childhood experiences. This shows me, especially childhood trauma, and even in the bottom section when they answer 18 and up, what has been occurring. And some of these scores on there are actually very shocking at how much trauma people have experienced. 20% of people who experience a traumatic event will develop PTSD. So this is where, if we look at an acute stress disorder, that is something to monitor as well. But noticing if the symptoms are going on longer than that, if it is PTSD. Leading causes of PTSD, sexual trauma, 94% are rape victims. And they will experience symptoms of PTSD within 2 weeks. That is a very shocking number. So this is my case presentation. As stated in the instructions, everything about this client is changed. The only thing that I couldn't change is the gender. So this is Jane. Jane is a 30-year-old female. Jane is happily married. Her husband is 32, so they're within the same age range. They have been married for 4 years. They are actually both employed. So she is a teacher at a Christian middle school. She loves her job. She also gets to teach softball, just part-time on the side. She loves being involved in the church. She loves being involved in the school, which they are fortunate that their school is a part of their church that they go to. Her husband has a full-time job as a UPS driver. He has amazing benefits, and like I said, they are very active in church. Jane said that they are the type of people that are there every Sunday, and if they were to take a vacation, they still try to make sure they're able to Zoom in and just be involved as much as they can. Her husband also does Sunday school from time to time as well. Both of them just really love the Lord and put him first, which is a very awesome marriage to have. I just need to get a drink real quick. So Jane came to see me because she had a miscarriage, unfortunately, which just was extremely hard for her and her husband. But her husband was not seeking services. I did offer to do kind of like a couple session, like 1 or 2 times. But Jane just wanted to come herself. So she came to my office. This was a bit after her miscarriage. This was about 6 months. She had a lot of blame. She was very early. She was about 5 weeks, which is most likely, the doctor said, due to a genetic abnormality. So from that standpoint, of course, that means it's out of her control. However, she still has that blame. She is not sleeping, and she is having flashbacks and nightmares, which I will go over more in depth when I show you the diagnoses. And she is experiencing symptoms of depression and anxiety. So a lot of different components going on. Whoops, I did not want to do that. I apologize. I'm trying to do this out of the presentation view, just so my references are still present. Jane does have a trauma history, actually, besides her miscarriage, or I should say prior to that. So as a child, she had a very verbally abusive mother. She was sexually assaulted in college it was by her boyfriend at the time. And she's lost a lot of significant people. She has lost grandparents. She has lost, this includes her husband as well, but parents. She has lost a niece before, cousins, just a significant amount of loss and pain. So the next part on here is the diagnoses. So let me just go to my little note here, and of course we can see that she does meet the diagnostic criteria for PTSD, which, let me just get in here real quick. I am going to see if I can shrink this real quick. Pause this. I'm learning Zoom, so even though I use it every day for work, it's still just a learning process, getting my computer to work with me. So, post-traumatic stress disorder and generalized anxiety disorder are kind of like my top two. However, digging in there is major depressive disorder. This was her first episode. She never struggled with depression before. She did struggle with anxiety, she reports, all her life. But because of the miscarriage, she is showing symptoms of both of those. And she also has a history of binge eating, which in my actual assessment of her is in there. She did have gastric bypass surgery, but the urges are still there, and her binging just looks differently because she can't eat as much, and if she does, it ends up coming back up. So, Jane experiences unwanted memories, flashbacks, nightmares, and emotional distress from the miscarriage. Okay. She has a very hard time going back to work. She is currently back. Her boss is very understanding, I should say extremely understanding of what has been going on, which is awesome. She tries to avoid thinking about her miscarriage, and she tries to distract herself, but it's just not enough. Let me see if I can get this back on. There we go. So this is a really hard time for her. She did endorse that she feels detached from herself. She has thoughts about, like I said, self-blame, Was she working out too much? She goes over that. She goes over what she ate. She has thoughts of believing that her miscarriage was a dream, which is really hard for her when she wakes up. One of the things I did do is I did recommend that she see a psychiatrist, so I actually did a psych referral for Jane, just to work in conjunction with the therapy route, just because of her prolonged time of not getting sleep. She also has had excessive worry about what will happen, what has happened. She's restless, she's fidgety, she's on edge, she's irritated. She, like I said, is not sleeping. She is constantly tense. She also was tapping her fingers and her legs were moving constantly in my initial assessment with her. She does have a lot of supporting factors. Like I said, her husband is wonderful. She's very close to her dad, and also her in-laws as well. She is actually willing, like I said, to do the psychiatric referral. I always kind of just have it out there for my clients. She wants to work on herself and improve herself. So what I'm going to do is bring this back up on here. So as you can see with, let's see if I can get this. There we go. As you can see, there's a lot of different disorders, but the main takeaway for this one is focusing on the PTSD. So we are at the treatment approach. So cognitive processing therapy, CPT, it's in there as both. We know from the readings and also from kind of like the videos that have been present on it, or if you chose this approach in any of the discussions or the reflection journals before, then you probably have a pretty good grasp on CBT. So the main goals of it are process natural emotions. I really like that it focuses on the meaning of things. So if something does happen, focusing on the why and the thoughts that you're having. It is also very accommodating. So you have a client that's not doing the work. Great, you're going to talk about it. It gives you time to actually explain things out to your client, and that is what I really look for in a treatment approach. Because no matter what I do, I kind of view my little treatment modalities like a toolbox. There's some that I believe will work the best for clients, and there's others that, could eventually work, but I want to try these things first. So the next part on here, I'm trying to make this just a little bit bigger. There we go. The main parts, once again, kind of building off the goals, learning about PTSD symptoms. We just went over those as a refresher, just because I like to make sure every single person is on the same page. You want to become aware of the thoughts and feelings about the trauma. So in this case, Jane needs to really focus on what she was feeling in the moments of the miscarriage, which I should go back and say that she had her miscarriage actually on the way to work. She does not know how she got there safely. She has no recollection of leaving her house and getting to work. She remembers waking up with some spotting, which doctor says was normal, and then it progressed the more she moved and as she got to work. She said that is just God watching over her. They'll also get to learn new skills. So Jane was able to learn new things about her mind, and kind of understanding the changes that are happening in the belief system as we work on it. So there's individual and group CPT, which is awesome. I am someone that also enjoys doing group therapy. So there's 12 sessions and they're 50 minutes. They can either be weekly or bi-weekly. One of the things I do is anytime I have someone with trauma, I do assess if there's risk, and then I see what is going on. So Jane is not suicidal, she's not homicidal, there's no presenting psychosis, like she is not hallucinating, she is not delusional. She is very aware of what's going on and recognizes the need for help. So this is kind of like another outline of what I'm going to be going through in the types of individual sessions. This is where I will have a handout that I'm actually going to be showing. There's 2 handouts. I'm going to show you some of the worksheets, just because that's the fun part, right? Is seeing what you're going to be handing clients and using with them, because that kind of puts it into perspective of what we've been learning. So there's 12 sessions, which is, a lot. It's a lot of work. You get that overview, you examine the impact of trauma, you work through different things, you do some more examining, you do a lot of different worksheets. And of course, you are going to focus on thinking patterns, the belief systems, safety, trust, power, control, review of esteem, processing intimacy, and the final impact statement. So the overview is, depending on the courses that you all have taken this far, each one of these is going to be administer the PCL5. So what I'm going to do is actually pull that up and just use that as a refresher again, just so you know what I am actually going to be talking about, because it makes it a little bit easier, like, oh, this is what it is, because sometimes we do forget, and that is okay. I know I am one that sometimes does forget things. So what I'm going to do is resume my share. Actually, I'm going to stop the share real quick and see if it'll let me share the screen. So this is the PCL5, which in one of the previous courses, we had to do this for all the assignments associated with the course. So some of us will probably be more familiar with it. I just got done with that course to starting this course, so it's a little bit fresher in the memory. So this is over what's been occurring the past month, and they get this every time because they are just monitoring week to week or bi-weekly appointments. Are there any improvements that are happening with the PTSD symptoms? So they have that scale 0 to 4, not at all, a little bit, moderately, quite a bit, or extremely. And it just goes through the criteria for PTSD, and it kind of puts it and breaks it down and explains it in a way that the client will be able to understand it. Now, anytime clients have questions, some of the things with these tools is they're not always made for just clients to read it. It's more of like a clinical standpoint of things. But this is actually a pretty simple tool. But I try to, with the way this works, is I have my reception team actually put it out, and then they can complete it in the waiting room, because sometimes when you give clients tools to complete, you're just in your office and then you're staring at them. Sometimes I try to say, hey, I'm going to do notes, because we always have notes, to try and make it a little less awkward. But if they're in the waiting room, they can really think about it and not feel super duper pressured. which is one of the things I really like about this tool is, don't be afraid to communicate with your team, because it makes a huge impact. So trauma-informed care, all those wonderful things really make a huge difference. The next thing on here is I'm going to get back and share my presentation again. So I just lost my face on here. There we go. Now I can share my screen again and get back to the first one. Of course, like I said, references are in the bottom there. While I do this, I do have notes that I'm going to be going over, so feel free if you need to take additional notes of what I'm going to be talking about. I know I'm a firm believer in explaining things just because having a lot on a PowerPoint can be very overwhelming. So we will talk about these 12. I'll try to keep it pretty brief. My notes though are in depth, just to kind of deepen understanding and things like that. Please, if you're doing this for the reply portion, if you have additional questions, don't ask, or if you have anything to add, or you've done this before, please don't hesitate. I really enjoy learning at how I can impact my clients, and help them for the best. So with this overview of PTSD and CPT, we got the first step down. We administer the PCL5. That is on every single slide. So I will just highlight that and skip that as we continue. One of the next things that's awesome is we get to describe the symptoms of PTSD. So Jane did some minimal Googling. So we talked about how it is normal for her to experience the things that she's experiencing. Excuse me, I just needed another drink. One of the things was her having a difficult time at work because she is triggered because she drove there and she can't remember that chunk of time from leaving her house to get to work. There is still some intermittent spotting that happens even though it's that far out. How she does have flashbacks to that morning when she got up. We focus on sleep, how she's avoiding things. She loves to do spin classes, and that is something she no longer wants to do. She doesn't even really want to go out with her husband that much anymore. So we did all those things and went over it, and we went over the PCL5 as well. The part is, I think a lot of people know that CBT is a treatment modality. It's often on a lot of websites and things like that. But with this, we just want to describe the cognitive theory. So talk about kind of the belief structure, the different categories. It's the world, good things, change memories to fit existing beliefs. So that is assimilation. We're of course not going to use that with clients because it might just go right over their head. How we do accommodation, change beliefs about the world, and also stuck points. So introduce what are stuck points, which will actually be in a handout a little bit later. Then we want to talk about the role of emotions in trauma recovery. So natural and manufactured emotions, as we know, are the two main types of emotions in trauma recovery. And then we want to review the index of trauma. And let's see if I get this in the next one. A continuation is we want to just describe the overall course of therapy. So the importance of practice, what the first half of treatment will look like. I always tell my clients, like with Jean, I said, this is going to be a lot of work. We're going to have handouts to do. It's very important that she comply with it. I told her ahead, there's going to be where we're looking at themes where you're going to be triggered, where we're going to talk about aspects of the miscarriage that are very hard. And then we do a handout and we go over it. We read over the handouts. Just because sometimes when we give handouts, they can be really hard to interpret. And then you just want to check in and see how the client is doing, because this is a lot to go over in one session. And this is very timed out. All of these are broken down into like 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending on what they are. It is very awesome because you have like a summary of things that you have to follow, which works for clinicians that kind of like that structure. Next, you're going to examine the impact of trauma. So once again, you administer the tool. You look at the tool. You have clients. So in this case, Jane did an impact statement. And we kind of tweaked it a little bit. Just because, this is used for trauma. I wanted to make sure that I was cautious about how I was talking about the miscarriage. But the nice thing is we correct the thoughts. So in an impact statement, the goal is, this is just for any client, is you write at least a page why you think this traumatic event occurred. We're not asking about the specifics. I kind of explained it as, specifically with Jane, is what have you been thinking about the cause of this happening? And I wanted her to view this as just a growth exercise, not putting blame that it was her, to kind of recognize, hey, that there are medical things that are out of my control that could happen, which is an awesome part, because I did not want her at any point to feel like this was her fault, which it wasn't. There's no substance use. She was not working out like an insane amount. She just did a spin class every day, and when she was pregnant, like, she still kept up that routine. She just changed what she was doing. So in this part, you have the client read it. If for some reason Jane was not adherent to it, we would talk about it. That's what I do with all my clients. And then I would explain the meeting, which I just did, is, it's not saying she is at fault for it. Like I said, that is the last thing I wanted her to feel like, even though that is easier said than done, because she is going to feel that. In addition, what's going to happen is you want to look at if there's any connections, if there's any anger, sadness, if she's scared, happy, if she's jealous, if there's any intensity of emotions, if there's guilt, shame, which we kind of call our manufactured emotions. Also focusing on physical sensations, interpretation of events, such as like her self-talk. So her saying this is her fault, that she fails at a lot of things, those negative ways of self-talk. We kind of take the impact statement and go back and look through and identify it. In addition, she will do an ABC worksheet, which I will actually pull up for you. We'll describe kind of the points of it, practice the assignment, go through an example. And once again, the check-in on here is referred to just kind of like your observations, what's been going on with her. So what I'm going to do is stop my share again, and let me pull up my video on here, and I am going to pull out this worksheet. Let me shrink myself again on here. So this is kind of an example of the ABC worksheet. So you have A, the activating event, B, the belief check point, C, consequences. In addition to this treatment approach, I love worksheets. I hand worksheets out to kids, teens, adults, the geriatric population. I just enjoy worksheets because it kind of shows me if they're going to be doing the work. So the activating event is something happens. B, the belief check point. I tell myself something, so that thought that they're telling themselves. I feel something is the consequence. So this one, the example is veteran experience. There's also another one on here that has to deal with rape. So my uncle raped me. I let it happen and didn't tell anyone. I feel guilt and shame. So Jane was, I had a miscarriage. I tell myself I should have contacted someone sooner. I knew something was wrong. I feel something. She felt guilt. And these are done quite a bit. They also do kind of like another statement that they have to think about. Are my thoughts above in column B realistic or helpful? So it is a valid thought, like I should have contacted someone sooner. However, it is out of our control. What can I tell myself on such occasions in the future? This one was phrased just a little differently. We kind of talked about when they do go back to trying to conceive again, just her resources and communicating with her OBGYN and having that team approach, whether it is, going in for an ultrasound early at 5 weeks, getting lab work, continuing to take pregnancy tests to see if that line is darkening. All those things are important and vital to do. So this kind of puts a visual to the things that wraps around like CPT with the ABC worksheet. So the next part is I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint and let me find myself again and share my screen. There we go. So that is kind of how you examine the impact of trauma in that session. So the next part is working with events, thoughts, and feelings. So in this session, once again, administered that PCL5, which with Jane, her symptoms kind of varied. It really just depended on the week. So as we got more like in the later part of the sessions, symptoms decreased a little bit, but they were still present, which is okay. We took time to review the impact statement. Again, just following up from previous sessions, you want to make sure that everything is kind of tying together. We reviewed that ABC worksheet, and it's nice to kind of go over that with a professional so you can be there to provide the support and help and make those connections. Also, you're gonna explain how it relates to trauma. In the worksheets, you can identify thoughts versus emotions, which is what I did with her. Kind of finding if there's a dominant emotion or a dominant thought. So that kind of stemmed from how there was guilt. And she did feel lonely because if you think this is something, yes, it did happen to her husband, but her husband was not the one that was actually carrying the child. So she did feel alone. We focus on kind of those stuck points. A lot of it was just placing that guilt and shame on herself. She did complete it, so the ABC worksheet was done beautifully, actually. We took time and kind of examined the self-blame that she was giving herself. Then we kind of went and reviewed like practice again. And we kind of called it a day and checked in. Now after this session with kind of like the check-in at the end, she was pretty anxious at the end of it, so we kind of just wrapped things up. Which the nice thing is I kind of will get to like the Christian perspective of things after we go through this, which is an awesome part. When we look at examining the index, once again, administer the tool, review the worksheets again, the ABC worksheets. That is a constant tool that you are giving them because you want them to work on those thoughts. In addition, I did ask if she wanted to do this to some of her other traumas in her life, and she did agree to that, even though we were focusing on the miscarriage. We did kind of look at what else could have been done. Should there have been like more support? Just kind of ruling all like kind of like the negative options just to get all those thoughts out because it is so important that you do that. In addition, you wanted to look at differences in responsibility and blame, going over that with her. We kind of focused on, she doesn't drink, she was working out, she's a very healthy person, and focusing on that the doctors did say she did not do anything wrong, that it was a genetic abnormality. We also kind of look at another worksheet on continuing challenging those thoughts. And then I kind of like wrapped that up. The worksheet assigning and then that check-in again. For quite a few of these with the worksheets, she was a little bit distressed because, like I said, it is very triggering. The use of challenging questions. So administer the tool. You review the challenging questions worksheet. Identify if there's any difficulty answering anything. Focus on the stuck points, which for her, like I said, is just getting past the point of it's my fault. Also, we kind of look at problematic thinking, which is another great point of this type of therapy because you're going to get more examples of Jane's thinking patterns and kind of see how her thinking patterns occur even outside of trauma. Especially with the miscarriage, we're going to focus on the negative feelings, identifying what has become like an automatic thinking pattern for her since the miscarriage. This is where you want to be supportive and you want to consult her as well. You'll give her practice, she'll get another worksheet for problem solving. That is also very similar to the ABC. They're all just structured like a little bit differently. Then kind of doing that check-in at the end again. And the patterns of problematic thinking, we administer the tool again. You review the patterns of problem thinking. So with Jane, I was thinking, does she have strong tendencies toward particular patterns? I'm going to look at how these patterns affect her reactions to the trauma and then kind of replace it with more adaptive cognitions. And in the worksheet, we are going to use the ABC worksheet. We're going to add her rate from 0 to 100% on the strength of her belief and the strength of her emotion on a scale of 0 to 100%. And this helps get deeper into what is going on with her thinking patterns. And then as we keep doing that, we're gonna practice a little bit, explain things, and then she will be given that to take home, and then we wrap up and check in again. So in the challenging beliefs, once again, utilize the tool. Review the worksheet again. All of these, once you're doing worksheets, you're going to be reviewing them to continue that build up. You're going to go over the different themes. So safety, trust, power, control, esteem, and intimacy. Prior and after, how did trauma affect your beliefs about the miscarriage for yourself? And also kind of the viewpoint of for others. If there's still stuck points, continue that worksheet as well. And this is where we should start seeing a shift. You're helping clients specifically. This is where I help Jane begin to introduce more moderate self-statements. So then we do a practice aspect. We referred the first step, safety, related to self and others. Then she identified negative beliefs about relative safety. She recognized the influence of the behavior, and we talked about other safety concerns as well. She will do another worksheet, like ABC, challenge the thoughts, and we did a check-in. So for the 8th one, processing safety and introducing trust, once again, we do the tool, we review the worksheets, we focus on Jane's like safety of herself versus others, and we build up any stuck points if she's still having the thoughts of blame, which they are decreasing at this point a little bit. It's easier said than done, like I said. Introduce the second of the 5 problem areas, which is trust. So self-trust, belief you can trust or rely on your own judgment or decisions. Jane is not in the place right now to really rely on her decisions. She thinks if bad things happen, she deserves it because she lost a child. She wonders how can her husband love her if she lost a child. How can her students learn from her when she is a disappointment and lost a child? All those things are coming from her. With this part, we looked at the thoughts of, did I do something to ask for this to happen? Why didn't I do this when this was happening? I should have known about this. Kind of identifying those thoughts. Also looking at trust in others, which this one she really didn't need much work on because she still trusts her partner. And then look at compare and trust, kind of doing like a before and after aspect. Then there is another worksheet where she will continue to challenge her thoughts, and keep working on the stuck points, and then we did another check-in. So the next one, you use the tool, review the worksheets again, introduce power control issues. So this is where we look at, like we kind of wrap up with trust, look at different kinds of trust, how like there's trust with money, a secret, all those different areas. Discuss her social support system, so who she trusts, people that she has removed out of her life from trauma. We're gonna talk about power control more, how people naturally expect they can solve problems and meet new challenges. Traumatized clients often try to control everything to be safe. This also stems from Jane's anxiety as well. We look at kind of what she does have control over and what she doesn't. Also power over others. So she couldn't control the situation at the time. She can't control her husband. She can't control her dog. She can't control her friends or family. So we kind of went through those different scenarios. And then we went over challenging those thoughts again for practice. She got homework. She reflected on power and control in her life for homework. And then we did another check-in. So in this 10th session, once again, administer the tool, review the worksheets, talk about power specifically. We build up before power, though, kind of trust. We also reviewed anger just like a little bit as well, how that can kind of come out as a concern with trust. In kind of this section, we looked at kind of self and others in regards to the esteem, and then we kind of just wrapped up on stuck points once again, because the goal was to kind of not get rid of these but have them diminish over time. And then we wanted to add in some self-care, because this is an aspect where she can control. So this is a part of the practice. So Jane decided to do one nice thing for herself each day. And this was taking every day to shower for like 5 to 10 minutes and listen to her favorite music. If she didn't want to shower for some reason, it was watch her show, because she stopped watching things that she enjoyed. And then to build up for the next session, we do that tool, review the worksheets. This is where I also wanted to add an additional incorporation of self-care in the remaining sessions, because I thought she needed to do more things for herself because of all this heavy self-blame. So what we did is, like I said, we're going to go and review the worksheets. Jane was really struggling with the self-blame, and she is a perfectionist, which is okay. Things around the house kind of started getting neglected a little bit, but that's okay. She just had a miscarriage within 6 months, so we talked about grace a little bit too. And in addition, we also looked at feeling guilty, feeling why you deserve this happening, why you need to enjoy more you time, why it's important to talk to someone. Because this is the second to last session, we want to talk about termination. We want to kind of nip the last little things. And we also talked about intimacy a little bit, and how has the relationship been affected by the trauma. So for example, even though it's been 6 months since the miscarriage, her and her husband have not had sex at all. Her husband is at a point where he is ready to try again, but Jane is not. And that's okay. That is something, that should be respected, because it is Jane's decision. But opening that communication between the two of them. In addition, we recognize the growth of at the beginning of the session and now, and looking at, are there any potential concerns happening? Is she using substances? Is she spending? Is she utilizing food? She has utilized food because of binge eating. She has only engaged in 2 binges, and she did start spending money. So that is, once this is done, we're going to look through kind of alternatives to focus on those concerns at hand. In addition, we're going to do just one more worksheet, reflect on all the things this far with the worksheets, and then we're going to just, once again, look at the client's reactions to the sessions and practice assignment. So in the last part, processing intimacy and the final impact statement, you give the tool again, which at this point, Jane's symptoms have decreased significantly. We reviewed the worksheets again. We looked at withdrawal from others. One of her self-care items was to get back working out, so she was able to do that. She did make an appointment with her OBGYN to talk about getting on the right path to conceiving again and communicating with her husband about that as well. We looked at a new impact statement and how that turned out better with kind of like the positive standpoint. And she recognized the medical aspect of things and had a lot less self-blame. We did recognize, like I said, it's not going to go away overnight or even in just 12 sessions. And then we looked at goals for the future. So the goal is she does want to get pregnant. She wants to have a family. She wants all these exciting things to happen in her life again. And she remained really hopeful. The next part is the Christian worldview. So what would happen is at the beginning of each session, we would say just a quick prayer together. She wanted to pray. We also utilized scripture towards the end of the session, kind of in that check-in, and focused on different verses every couple sessions. And then we talked about the impacts of trauma on spirituality. So instead of the 50 minutes, I actually had an hour with her. So we kind of used a little bit of time to like de-escalate if needed, or just wrap up with the Christian integration approach. So one of the verses that we talked about was Isaiah 41 verse 10. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Then we looked at Lamentations 3:21-23. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. And the last one is, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. This is one of the last verses that we touched on in the last couple sessions to ease towards termination. We did talk about how our spirituality is impacted by trauma. So while her faith was still intact, she experienced some negative aspects. She still continued to pray as a coping skill. She did find comfort in God. She also found a great sense of comfort knowing that her baby was in heaven and they would be reunited one day. She didn't really have much appreciation of life, didn't really have a purpose, didn't really feel closer to God. She did feel isolated from the church a little bit. She said in the first month she did feel alienated from God and wondered why he would do this to her. But she didn't lose her faith fully. Her husband was a rock for her and tried to found things in Christ. She had that guilt and that self-blame. And I want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this. I know it is a lot at once. It is not an easy subject to talk about. But these are my references all together. Like I said, if there are any questions, Jane is actually doing wonderful right now. She is actually pregnant, and she still is in therapy. We just see each other. I think some weeks it's bi-weekly, but other times it's every 3 weeks or sometimes once a month. It really just depends. But we do work on other sorts of trauma. Jane is a wonderful client. Like I said, all this information was changed. But overall with CPT, it was a great choice for her to be able to do all the worksheets because she said she is a teacher. She enjoys having to do those worksheets, and she loves giving her students worksheets, so it made sense for her and the way her brain worked to really recognize that. Does she still experience self-blame from time to time? Yes, she does. And this is a bit of a ways out since we've ended those 12 sessions. So for all of you, I really hope you've learned something from this approach. I enjoyed kind of being able to put it all together for you. Like I said, any questions, anything like that, please don't hesitate to ask, all right? I hope you all enjoy this final week that we have coming up, and you all have a great holidays. Thank you. Bye.